Hi everyone, I'm Andy Smith. I work for Axway as a pre-sales consultant, and I've got a little short talk and then a quick demonstration that shows you some of our API management and service mesh capability. So we're going to talk about what a traditional API management architecture looks like and why that might not necessarily be the right thing for managing microservices. A quick look at what a service mesh is and how that might help. And then for the demo, I'm going to create a really simple hello world type service using an Axway tool called API Builder. I'm going to deploy that into a service mesh, and then I'm going to create a proxy for it on Axway's Amplify platform and publish it into a catalog. So just a few slides and then I'll get to the demo. So microservices with a traditional API gateway. API gateways are quite often deployed at the edge of organizations, doing things like authenticating, authorizing action, authorizing access, perhaps some threat protection, perhaps some rate limiting. Sometimes you see them deployed on the internal network as well, acting as a kind of integration gateway, so maybe transforming RESTful API calls into SOAP requests, doing some kind of security mediation. But in a microservices environment, you might view that as something of a bottleneck, and it doesn't really seem to sit well with the microservices approach. So microservices with micro gateways looks slightly different. There's a pattern which it sounds like some of the others have already talked about this afternoon, the service mesh pattern, in which each microservice is going to get assigned a micro gateway or sidecar that's going to govern that microservice. It's going to make sure that for one microservice to talk to another microservice, they do that through the sidecar, so you don't have to worry about where that other microservice lives. If there's any kind of authentication or authorization that needs performing, the micro gateway does that. It might implement something like a circuit breaker pattern. And if we look at Agile deployment with a traditional API gateway, so as you deploy your microservices, you've actually got, in some cases, you might have a dependency on an external resource to create some kind of proxy definition on an API gateway. They might have to go in and attach a policy or even author a policy, but you've got this external dependency. And if you contrast that with Agile with a micro gateway, so as the microservice is deployed using the service mesh pattern, that micro gateway, that sidecar, gets attached to your microservice automatically. It's part of the same CI/CD process. So I think it was March this year, we launched Amplify. So some of you might be aware of Axway. You might know that we've got API gateway, full lifecycle API management capability, as well as things like managed file transfer and B2B. And in March, we launched the Amplify platform. And in the Amplify platform, you've got this separation between the control plane, which runs in Axway SaaS, and that's kind of where you monitor, govern, manage, secure all of your data planes. So you might actually be running a multitude of different API gateways. You might be running them in Google Cloud, in AWS. You might be running them on-premise. You can have visibility and control of them all from Amplify Central. And that kind of pattern applies to the service mesh as well. So again, you might be running a number of these. And through Amplify Central, you've got that visibility and control. So the service mesh is actually, it's built on Istio, and it's got a number of Axway agents also added to that environment. So it's Kubernetes plus Istio plus some Axway agents. And they do things like automatically discover when a microservice has been deployed into your environment, attach a sidecar, and have it automatically pop up in the SaaS control plane. So it's registered and it's visible for you to attach policy if you choose to. So I'm getting towards the demo now. I'm going to create this really simple Hello World service. I'm going to use an Axway tool called API Builder. So it's a Node.js app, low-code microservice development. So we'll quickly create a project. We'll then take that project, we'll build it into a Docker image, and we'll push that into a registry. And then I've got a pre-prepared Helm chart that we'll use to install that service into our service mesh. And what should happen is when I log into Amplify, have a look at the environment that I've got configured in there, I should see a new service automatically register at the bottom. And we can then take that service, we can create a proxy at the edge of the cluster, we can publish it into the catalog for people to discover it. So, onto the demo. Let me just come out of PowerPoint. Okay, so to create a new project in API Builder, it's really simple. API Builder in it. It's a Node.js app. It's free for you to try and install under an indie license. Sorry, 1 second. I actually had a So back into the builder directory. Give it a project name. CD into that directory. Install some Node libraries. And we're off. So I've got a project already running. Let me just show. So this is a vanilla install. It looks just like what I did with the when I installed the libraries previously. The exception being the Helm charts that I've copied in. And within that Helm chart, I've just identified the repository and I've tagged the project name. So if I now just start up that project, and I should now have a console where we can actually start configuring our microservice. So quite often, the customers that use API Builder, they'll do the vanilla install like I just did. They'll also install connectors. So maybe a connector for MySQL or MongoDB. Once you've installed the connector and you've configured it to point at a particular schema, say, then you'll have a view of all your different database tables. And you can go through a quick wizard in API Builder, pick out all the tables, all the columns that you want in your API. You can rename, you can do joins, you can decide what methods you want in your API, and ultimately it'll spit out a Swagger definition. Or you can import a Swagger definition and then actually go into what we call the flow palette and configure it that way. And so for this example, I've got this greet flow. So all new builder projects get this greet flow by default. So you've got a palette here, we've got nodes on the left that you drag onto the palette, do some configuration. If I had some database models, they'd be available here for me to drag onto the palette, pull out some fields out of a database perhaps mash that up with some SaaS service, say, and then save the project. And I can test it through the tool itself. So this should say, howdy Andy, we've got a 200, howdy Andy. So if I now go back to the command line, and in that project directory we ship with a default Docker build file that looks like that. So if I now just go ahead and build that image, while that runs, I've got a cheat sheet somewhere. So the image is built. If I just check, it should be that top image there that says none. It's not currently tagged. So if I just copy that image ID, log into my Docker registry. Push the image. Almost there. And then one last step. Install that into my cluster using Helm. So that looks healthy. Okay, so I now should be able to go to Amplify. So this is the SaaS control plane that I talked about, where you monitor, manage, govern, secure all of your service meshes and API gateways. That's the service that I've just created. It's automatically been registered in Amplify. I should be able to go in here. It's picked up the Swagger. I can now expose this through a proxy on the edge of the Kubernetes cluster. Deploy that into the cluster. Publish it into our unified catalog. So this is the place where people that are building apps come along and discover what integration endpoints, what APIs are available. So it's appeared in the catalog. I can come in and I can hopefully test it via the proxy that I've just created. Yep, that's working. So that's everything I had for you today. We're at the stand for the next 2 days, so if anybody's got any questions, please pop by. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.